Okay, we are live. Bruce, take it away. Bruce, you're on mute.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm in the beautiful Tempe, Arizona. As you can see, it's already warm. Already got a red face. And I wanted to say hello to Tarisa Shelton, who's with Factum Financial, and she's actually going to give us a great overview on some financial basics. So good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see this?
We got it.
Okay. And then are all the people in the Zoom, is that the same amount of people watching the live stream, or is that different?
I'm not sure. Is Anthony there?
Yes, so there is a little difference. We are monitoring, Tim and I are monitoring from others, so we'll be putting comments in the chat if there's any comments from the live stream. So we'll be monitoring that for y'all, so go right ahead.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Good. All right, well, I'll just jump into it. Happy Friday to everybody. My name is Tarisa, and then today we're just going to be going over some habits for prosperity. I think this is something that's not typically taught in schools, and I wish it was, because it makes all the difference in essentially our quality of life. So today's agenda, we're going to be going over how important mindset is, education and resources to seek out, actions and habits of the wealthy, and then tips that you can implement in your everyday life. And I apologize because my allergies have been so bad, so my voice might be a little bit raspy. All right, so a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Arizona. This is my beautiful family, and I was taught a lot of things about money that most people were, which was, go to school, get a good job, get a 401k, and then when you're 65, you can finally enjoy your life. And then the other things that I implemented and that was really highlighted as something that was super important was, don't go into debt, pay cash for everything, just work really hard, basically. And so I took that to heart. So I went to Mesa Community College for 2 years and then transferred to Arizona State University after that. And I'm very grateful that I graduated with my bachelor's degree. However, I worked like 2 full-time jobs throughout college and went to school full-time so that I wouldn't graduate with any debt. And as you can see in this picture, I was really tired. And so I started thinking, like, if what financial security and freedom gives you is time and money freedom, how can I focus on that instead of trading all of my time for money? Because at the end of my college career, I had my degree, which again, I'm so grateful for, but I also didn't have a lot of time to spend with my family and friends and to do the things that I really enjoyed. And I definitely didn't have a lot of money at that time. So I started asking better questions like, okay, what do wealthy people do? And what habits and actions do they implement to allow them to have more time and money freedom? I'm sure you guys have all heard this, but success leaves clues, right? So I realized I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. I just needed to change my behaviors to get more of what I wanted out of life. And so that's why I'm so excited to be here with y'all today. A big thanks to Anthony and Dwellin for having me on. I'm just so excited to share this information with you all because it's something that I wish I would have learned a long time ago. And typically our financial education comes from the people closest to us. And so one of the things that I always like to point out is that not all advice is good advice. And if you want to go somewhere financially, you need to really be listening to people who are on the way to where you want to go or have already accomplished what you set out to accomplish. All right, so the first big thing is mindset. So I love this quote by Henry Ford. He says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So really accomplishing goals in general all begins with mindset. So you have to have the right framework of thinking in order to accomplish what you want to. As humans, we are so hardwired to be problem solvers. And so this is so important because if you tell yourself, I can't do something, that's literally where your brain stops thinking. Whereas if you start asking, how can I? Then you can have an infinite number of possibilities and solutions available to you. So this chart is one of my favorites. So your mindset really is the foundation of all of your actions and results. So your mindset affects your thoughts, which then influences your feelings, which then spurs into actions and ultimately your results. So it's kind of like you're planting good seeds all the time is the goal. And that's sometimes hard, right? It's hard to always be positive. It's difficult sometimes to, just be on the more positive side of things and to tell yourself that you can do something, especially in the face of challenges. So I have a few examples of this, and I couldn't remember the name of the book, but there is this huge difference between having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So again, a fixed mindset is like you're stating a fact, like I can't do this, versus how can I do this? That's a growth mindset. You're open to learning and to implementing different actions to get different results. A big thing is I can't afford this. I know that I was wondering if people could see or ask questions in the chat. I don't know if Anthony, if you could kind of spur that over to me, but I wonder how many people have thought this before. Like, I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to, take this educational course. I can't afford to go on vacation. It's so frequent. Yeah, Bruce said yes. Yes, exactly. So it's interesting to observe those thoughts and how they show up and start being intentional about shifting them. Like, how can I afford this? Because again, then your brain is actually looking for the solution instead of just stopping at, I can't afford this. Another one that comes up a lot when people are successful is, they're so lucky. And I think the better thing to ask yourself is, why can't I do that same thing for myself, right? How can I take that person to coffee and ask them how they did it? Another one is money is evil. I always laugh when I think about this, but if you look at a lot of just like movies in general, they always paint very successful people that make a lot of money as like not necessarily the best of character, which hasn't been my experience, honestly. I find that people who have a lot of money are very generous with it, not only their resources, but their time. And they're also trying to figure out how can they make those dollars do good things in the world. Another one is, I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough. Personally, I'll tell on myself, this one comes up a lot for me. I think it's so natural to feel imposter syndrome and to kind of discount yourself for opportunities because it's a new challenge or, just something that pops up that necessarily you haven't been frequent enough in that space to feel comfortable with it. Like, to be honest, public speaking is something for me that makes me so uncomfortable. But I realize like I have so much value and knowledge to give to other people. And by not putting myself in those spaces, people aren't better for it. Exact. And so this is one that is I guess the sword I'll fall on. And so I had to start reframing that conversation and start asking, how can I learn what I need to in order to be successful? Someone said, Tarisa must have been reading my journal. I've said all of those. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's such a human experience thing, right? It's just, we don't realize how limited our way of thinking is. And so it's important to surround yourself with people who challenge you in your way of thinking. this one also comes up a lot for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people. I don't want to fail. So many times we look at risks or opportunities as something like, okay, well, I could do that, but what if the worst case scenario happens and, I'm homeless, or I don't have a job, or whatever that looks like. We all catastrophize situations that we're excited about, honestly. So in order to kind of shift that again, it's how can I learn from this, right? How can I learn from this opportunity? So it all starts with mindset, especially with finances. And that's why I really wanted to bring this up as a point of importance, because we have to start planting these seeds of abundance so that we can, let them grow. All right, the second big pillar here is education. So I wonder, can anyone put in the chat, how many people have heard of Robert Kiyosaki? I'm curious. Bruce said yes. Yes. Okay. Awesome. I'm loving all of these yeses. Yeah, he is amazing in the financial realm. He really gives it to you straight, I guess is a way I would say that. And he is the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant. So if you haven't read those books, I highly recommend them. They'll just give you new insights on money in general. And again, just your way of thinking about things. So one of his quotes that I love is, your financial intelligence is low, or excuse me, if your financial intelligence is low, money will run all over you. It will be smarter than you. If money is smarter than you, you will work for it all of your life. To be the master of money, you need to be smarter than it. Then money will do as it's told. It will obey you. Instead of being a slave to it, you'll be the master of it. This is financial intelligence. So I want to pose this question to the audience here. If you give a person $1 million who doesn't know what to do with it, what do you think will happen? I'm going to give you guys this awkward silence here so I can get an answer in the chat. Because really what it boils down to is it's not necessarily lack of money that's the issue. It's our lack of education with what to do with it. Yeah, exactly. A fool and his money will soon part. Tim, I'm really liking your answers here. Alexandria said bye. Yes, Anthony, you're so right. It will end up back in the same hands that it came from. And this is why it's so important to increase our financial intelligence, because it really doesn't matter how much money we make if we have no idea how to keep it. And not only how to keep it, but how can we send it out and have it come back with friends, right? That's really the goal. So these are a few books that have really set me on my path of, increasing my financial intelligence, but to be honest, also my path of financial freedom. So the first one is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We kind of talked about that already, but basically the premise of this book is, he had two dads to learn from. One of his real dad was giving him, typical advice that we're all taught: go to school, get a good job, get a 401k, everything will all work out. Whereas his best friend's dad was an entrepreneur, and he basically was teaching him the exact opposite of what his real dad was teaching him. And his friend's dad ended up being a huge business owner in the state of Hawaii. And ultimately, I don't even know how many businesses this guy ended up owning, but he started with his bootstraps, right? But it's basically the parallels of those two stories and the differences of the outcome of each of them. So if you haven't read that book yet, I really highly recommend it. The second one is Killing Sacred Cows by Garrett Gunderson. And this one was a huge game changer for me, because a lot of financial intelligence is unlearning what we've learned, to put it simply. But he basically goes over the 7 money myths that we all believe to be true, and then kind of goes about disproving those things. And last but not least, this one is fundamental. And actually, this is a pretty old book, but it's The Richest Man in Babylon. And he basically goes over just really great money principles. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about that today. And if anyone is interested, Anthony said, lose it because they need a blueprint on what to do with the money. You can't just hand someone money and not direct them how to invest it or to make a profit off of it. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the problem, right? It's like, okay, we have this amazing tool. Now we need to learn how to use it, right? We need the proper application of that money. Thanks, Angie, for tuning in and commenting. And I wanted to say as well, I actually put together a list of books and resources that have been so instrumental to me in my path of, financial freedom and just trying to increase my financial intelligence. So if anyone wants that after this presentation, just let me know. I'll have my email out and I'd be happy to send you that list of books. I love reading books. I know a lot of people love podcasts and audiobooks. Most of those books on there, I believe, have audio versions too for all of my podcast peeps out there. Okay, so here are the ways that we can get educated, right? Resources are so abundant. So first one for me, and I think for a lot of people, books. There's also a lot of podcasts out there about increasing your financial intelligence. Mentors are huge. I have a ton of mentors who are all wildly more successful than I am, right? But because success leaves clues, it's so important to find somebody that you respect and admire as a person, but also who's successful in the areas that you want to be successful in. And what I've noticed is we kind of hinder ourselves from a lot of opportunities because we're afraid to ask. We're afraid to ask for help. We're afraid to ask for a mentor. And I would say just do it. Get in the habit of putting yourself out there and getting uncomfortable, because the worst that someone can say is no. And if they say no, at least you've tried, right? And a lot of people, like I said, I don't think that they are willing enough to do the asking. And if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So a quick story of this, there's a man named Steve Chater that I really look up to. He owns quite a lot of businesses, is super successful in real estate, not only as an investor, but also as a mentor to investors. Yeah, Tisha said, if you don't ask, you don't get. Exactly. And so I asked him, hey, would you mind mentoring me or giving me advice on some of these things? And he was like, absolutely. So it was that easy. Like, I was nervous to ask, but he said yes. And so now I'm under kind of his wing and learning a lot from him right now, which I'm super grateful for. So all that to say, if you have someone that you look up to, just try to see if you can get connected with them. The other thing is networking. So I really believe as humans, every single one of us has so much value to offer. And so when you get to know a multitude of people, you're able to expand your ability to help others, but you're also able to learn so much from other people that are experts in different areas. Webinars is a big one. So I actually attend free webinars about money all the time because people really are so generous with their resources and their time. And you really just need to be intentional about seeking that out. Like Anthony putting this whole summit together for everybody to learn from, I think is so incredible, which is why, again, I'm so excited to be here. This is my favorite method of learning about money. Ask a millionaire to lunch. So many times successful people, get asked to do things for others, like, hey, can you check out my business proposal? Or, hey, can you, what's your advice on this? But if you literally go into that conversation of saying, hey, I really admire you, I would love to treat you to lunch. That is the cheapest and best education I've ever received, is asking very successful people to lunch, because who says no to free food, really? Some of them do, but most of them don't, I would say. So those are my tips on kind of being intentional about seeking out those resources. All right, actions and habits. So this is in the cash flow quadrant, I believe, which is one of Robert Kiyosaki's book, but he basically says we have this backwards. So we always want to have the things first and then do the things successful people do and then eventually be that successful person. But what he's saying is you have to be that successful person. Like, what does a millionaire do every day? How do they treat people? What do they focus on? You know, what are their priorities? How can you be that person today so that it shows up in your future? So I really want to talk about, you know, the habits and actions of wealthy people, because it's very easy to implement. It's more just a mindset shift that needs to happen. Okay, so rule number 1, invest in yourself. You are your best asset. So if that means, you know, invest in your education or going to that networking event, or, you know, just putting yourself in front of people that you can learn from. You know, your return on investment when you bet on yourself, I don't really truly believe it's something you can calculate. So always just be investing in yourself. I remember my dad used to tell me this all the time, and I would always roll my eyes. And now I realize he's smarter than me, you know, one of those things. Okay, I want to ask in the chat, if anyone is listening, you know, have you had an experience where you maybe told yourself you couldn't afford something, or there was this class you wanted to take, or something of that sort where it required an investment? And if you did it, what was the result of that? Because I really want to hear, you know, from you guys what your story is with that experience. Yes, Bruce says it pays back many folds. Absolutely. And that's something that you can control, right? Like, you can control how much education you've received in implementing that. Oh, Alexandria said, ask again. Okay, so my question is, like, have you had an experience where you were nervous to make a financial commitment to learn something you were excited about learning, and you did it, and what was the result of that? I think so many times we're like a little nervous to part with our dollars, because we don't fully see what the end result of that investment would be. But at the end of the day, if you make that investment, what has that yielded you in your life? Okay. Tisha said, many of my recent investments have taken weeks of time. Currency isn't always green. Time has a monetary value. Absolutely. I've invested in long-term training, the result in certification and new clients in business. Awesome. That's amazing. Exactly. So it's like you're planting the seeds of being successful now. And rule number 1 is always invest in yourself. Thank you for sharing that, Tisha. Okay, so rule number 2, rich and wealthy people focus on cash flow versus accumulation. Now, this is so huge. Oh, Tisha said, I've also invested in life insurance that became income for me when I first started my business. Amazing. Yes, I love that strategy. That's something that I teach people about often. Alexandria said, no, but my situation, I have so many things I want to learn. I'm unable to financially support it, but that will change. Yes, and I would say get as much free education as you can. And books are always the best mentors if you're trying to be cost efficient. Okay, so cash flow versus accumulation. Okay, so an example of this is, let's say you take 2 people. One person is focusing on cash flow. The other person is focusing on accumulation. So cash flow, this person ends up over the course of, let's say, 10 years, purchasing 3 to 4 rental properties throughout their lifetime. Whereas person B puts all of their money in, let's say, a qualified plan, 401k, retirement money. When both of those people are 65, these rentals are paid off, right? So let's say the monthly income from each property is $2,000 a month. And let's say they had 4 properties paid off in that time frame. So this person has created $8,000 cash flow for their retirement income, right? Those properties are paid off, the tenants paid off the mortgage, whereas person B is focusing on how to make sure that they don't outlive their money. And those are two very different mindsets. It's abundance versus scarcity, right? And a lot of people that are in retirement they're nervous about not having enough money when they retire. And the difference is, what strategy are you focusing on, right? Are you focusing on how to invest today so that you have cash flow for the future? Or are you focusing on collecting all of your eggs in a basket and then spending all those eggs later? So that is a huge one. Anthony said, the summit was not sure I was going to get my ROI back, but I've gotten it back in a multitude of knowledge in running virtual conferences and events. Yes. Yeah, Anthony, you're awesome and amazing. And thank you so much for putting this together. It's so, oops, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, here we go. So anyone have experience with cash flow? While that's kind of populating in the chat, I'm going to give you a few ideas, because I think so many times it's easy to get a little overwhelmed if you haven't really trained your brain to think that way. So one example is, right now we're a 3-car household. My brother lives with me, so he pays me a little bit of rent while he's going to college, right? So that offsets my mortgage a little bit. In addition, I have my boyfriend and I live together. So we have 2 cars now. We both work from home. And so we're thinking about Turoing one of the vehicles that we have just kind of sitting. So Turo is like a Airbnb for cars. So you put your car on Turo, someone else rents it, and you can get cash flow from that. Airbnb is a really good one. So a lot of times you don't even necessarily have to buy the property. You could have an agreement with the property manager, and you could make the Airbnb income and then give the property owner whatever their cut is of the rent that they would make, right? But you can pocket that difference. What else? Honestly, just like long-term holding real estate you could do. So one of the cheapest ways to add on to your like real estate portfolio is you can have, excuse me, sorry, I knew my voice would kind of go out a little bit. My allergies have been so bad. Okay, hang in with me here, guys, with my voice. So another idea and a really cheap way to kind of add on to your rental portfolio is you could buy a primary residence, live there for 2 years, save up down payment money for your next house, buy that next property and rent out the original. So it's kind of like hopscotching, but the beauty of that is, when you're buying a primary residence, you only need to put 3 to 5% down on that property, versus if you're purchasing an investment property, that usually takes 20% down. So that's a really great way to add on to your portfolio in, I would say, the most cost-efficient way. Or, okay, Bruce said rent land for parking spots for events. Yeah, exactly. So I want to just kind of plant this seed for all of you guys listening. Really try to focus on cash flow, because if you can have your cash flow exceed your expenses every single month, then you don't have to work if you don't want to. And not to say that you shouldn't. I think we're purpose driven, so we always need to be doing something that brings value into the world. But it does make life easier when you just have passive income coming in that you didn't have to trade your time for. Okay, and this is kind of going into that mindset, but buy assets before you buy liabilities, right? So if you have a rental property that's producing $300 or $400 a month, and you want to buy a car that the payment is $300 or $400 a month, well, now you've had your rental income pay for the car that you want. So you're not really out of pocket anything. So the whole goal of rich people, and I think it's a smart one, is how can I have someone else pay for this, right? That's all it is. How can I have someone else pay for the things that I want? And if anyone has asked their parents for money when you're younger, or your grandparents, you're like, hey, can I have $20? And then they give it to you. Doesn't that feel so nice? So it's essentially that on a larger scale, right? Another point, don't lose money. So Warren Buffett is one of the most successful investors in, I would say probably in the nation. And he says, rule number one, don't lose money. Rule number two, don't forget rule number one. So we generally trade so much time to accumulate all the money that we have. So when you lose money, you're in a sense losing time. So the more money we can keep and the more money that we can put in smart places to create cash flow, the better and easier our life gets. Implement successful habits daily. So this is important because we're just really a combination of all of our habits. Like where we're at today is a combination of all of our past habits. So if we can be successful in our daily habits, reading, learning, getting connected with like-minded people that you appreciate and enjoy, that just makes the environment for success so much more fertile. And growth mindset versus fixed mindset, we've kind of covered that already. Figure out what your purpose is. You have so much value to add to the world. Don't play small and don't sell yourself short, because everyone is so beautiful and unique in their own way. And the more you can grow and foster that, the more positive effects you have on other people doing the same thing for themselves, which I think is just such a beautiful pursuit in itself. Rich people also focus on leveraging other people's talents and gifts, right? So instead of it's Tarisa has to do everything, I know everything. No, it's, Bruce is amazing at processes and systems. How can I have his insight on my business workflow? Or Anthony is amazing at bringing community together and putting on virtual summits, right? So how can I collaborate with him in the future? So everyone has a talent and gift, and you don't have to be an expert in everything, but it is so important to know other experts so that you can essentially leverage their talents and gifts, right? They're going to enjoy doing that thing so much more than you would have, and they're probably going to be a lot better at it in comparison. And we've talked about this one already, but have money work for you instead of working for money. Rich people focus on this all the time because money can work 24/7, 7 days a week, right? We have a limited capacity on how much time we can spend working for money. So that is really, in a nutshell, all the habits of wealthy people. And again, a lot of it has to do with the mindset shift. All right, so now we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty. So here are some 5 practical tips that you can implement in your daily life or habits to set you on that wealth building path, with certainty. So you always need time and consistency to build wealth. I think in this day and age, especially with younger people, it's common to want immediate gratification, right? It's like, oh, I see this shiny thing, I want it right now. And wealth doesn't happen that way. You need time and consistency, right? You need to not lose money. You need to be buying assets. You need to focus on cash flow. So here are some 5 tips that have really helped me, and that if you read, honestly, any financial book, they're going to tell you about these things as well. Rule number 1, most important rule, is pay yourself first. You are your best asset, and when you get paid, whether that's from your business or whether it's from your 9 to 5, whatever that looks like, before you pay any bills, you need to put 10 to 20% in your savings immediately. And it's so simple, and yet you'd be shocked how many people don't do it. And this is so important for a number of reasons. If you have an emergency or if you have an opportunity, you'll have access to a large portion of funds over time, because real life happens all the time, right? There's things that we can't expect or plan for, and always paying yourself first and having reserves is so important. Yes, Alexandria said, pay yourself first, 10 to 20%. Yes, exactly. Okay. And then this is in the Richest Man in Babylon book. So essentially what he says 10% to savings. I think you should be doing 20, honestly, if you can, depending on your budget, or at least work your way up to that amount, because just everything going on with inflation and things being more expensive, it's like our dollar doesn't go as far as it used to, right? So we kind of have to buffer for that in how we're putting aside emergency and opportunity funds. But basically what he says in that book is put 10% to savings, 20% to pay off debt, and 70% to living expenses. And I want to go into the context as to why this is important, because a lot of people tell me, you know, in my conversation, like, hey, Tarisa, I'm really focused on paying off my credit card debt. And that is so great. Like, it's great to be focused on that. However, typically that person also doesn't have any savings. So my question to anyone who's focused on that is, well, what happens if an emergency happens and you don't have any savings? What are you going to use? And the answer is your credit card, right? So you should always be focusing on saving first, paying off debt second, and then, you know, accommodating your living expenses. Because if you don't have any savings, you know, if something happens, you have to pull out that credit card again. Rule number 2, evaluate your spending habits. So my recommendation to everyone here on the call is print out your bank statements literally for the past 2 to 3 months. Take 2 different highlighters and you highlight your needs versus your wants. So this is important for a number of reasons. One, it'll probably give you a shock. But the cool thing about it is once you know where your money is going, you can now then tell your money where you want it to go instead of just being like, oh my gosh, I spent over, you know, $800 eating out. You know, it happens so quickly. It's super easy to swipe that card. So evaluate your spending habits, print out your bank statements, figure out where your money is going. I would say download an app to help you track your spending. So there's a lot of, yeah, exactly, Bruce, thanks. Bruce says some banks have trackers by categories you can sign up for, usually free services. Exactly. And the cool thing that this does is it gives you your big financial picture, right? Okay, so you can be accountable to yourself and saying, hey, what are my goals? But also, are my spending habits in alignment with where I want to go? And if there's a discrepancy there, then we need to kind of change our actions a little bit. And yeah, tell your money where you want it to go. Okay, rule number 3, save, invest, and then limit speculation. So savings and investing, kind of those 2 terms have gotten a little bit convoluted. When you think about savings, you always want to put it in a place where it's safe, it's liquid, you have access to it in the event of emergencies or opportunities. So you're putting it in a place where it can never go down. So a lot of people say, hey, Tarisa, I'm saving for retirement. And then I ask them, okay, well, is that money, does it have the potential to go down? Do you have the potential to lose that money? And if the answer is yes, then you're not saving for retirement. You are investing or speculating with your retirement funds. There's a difference. In your savings, you can't lose money, right? Because if you looked into your account tomorrow, your savings account, and it went down by 30, 40%, would you still want to put your money there? You know, there's a difference. So savings, you can't lose that money. It should only be going up over time. Now let's talk about investing. So investing is something that you have control over the return on investment, right? So things like investing in yourself, investing in your business, investing in real estate, investing in something that produces cash flow is really important. And you typically have more control over those factors, right? Like, let's say it's real estate and I want to improve the property. Well, now I can rent it out for more than I originally could have. Speculation. So these are environments where you don't have any control, you have limited access, and money can go up or down frequently. So this environment is very inconsistent. So I would say you want to avoid this as much as you can until you're at a point where you could afford to lose that money, right? Because if you don't know what the return on investment is going to be, if you can't control how much that return on investment is going to be, you're speculating with funds that are probably being put aside for retirement or for things that are really important that you'll need in the future. All right, credit is also super important. So here are some credit tips for all of my people listening in. So you want to keep all of your credit cards below a 30% of utilization to have a great score. So for an example, if you have $1,000 limit on a credit card, I'd recommend that you maximum keep your balance at 300 bucks. And essentially your credit score is just a kind of pat on the back for, yes, you know how to manage money. That's basically what it is. Don't cancel your credit cards. This actually decreases your score. And I didn't actually know this, but it's happened to me, which is why I think it's important to share. If you don't have any money on a credit card and you haven't been using it for a while, they will reduce your limit. Or close your account, right? Because they're saying, oh, you're not actually using this credit card. So I'd recommend putting like some silly $10 subscription or something like that monthly that you're already paying for on a credit card, just to show that you're using that credit card and you can get that pat on the back for your credit score. All right, so there's also two different types of credit. There's revolving credit, which is credit cards. So revolving just means kind of ongoing. And then there's installment credit, which is car loans. So both of these are really important in building up your credit history. And that's why it's important to have both on there. So like if you've ever paid off a car loan, chances are your credit score has actually gone down. Same thing with credit cards. If you pay off all your credit cards, you know, your score will dip. And a lot of people don't know that, which is why I'd say keep it below a 30% utilization rate maximum, and always have something small kind of going on those credit cards to prove that you have credit history. And whatever you do, don't cancel your credit cards. Oops. Okay, number 5, have a vision. So one of the things that Steve Chater says that I love so much is you don't drift to a desired location, right? If we're going on a road trip, we know where we want to go. We have our set destination. So in order to accomplish your goals, you have to know what you want out of life and what you expect for yourself and the standards that you're setting. So you have to know where you want to go. And write your goals down. You are actually statistically 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. And that's a huge number. So don't ever underestimate the power of knowing what it is that you want and making a plan to get there. And if you don't know how you could get there, then learn from someone who is already doing what you want to do, right? Take them to lunch or coffee. Yeah, Bruce said, and make it visible. Yes, make a vision board. Bruce is really amazing at making vision boards and, putting things in picture format. Okay, so I want to open it up for questions. I think we're at, around 8:45 here. So I am happy to give you as much advice and answer as many questions as I can in this, 15 minutes. Alexandria said, thank you. Yes, you're welcome. Oh, Bruce said, talk a little bit about the discipline. Yeah. Like I said, to build wealth, it takes time and consistency, right? So if you can't control your own habits, that needs to be, the first rule of thumb, because it's so easy to spend money, honestly. And it's fun, right? But at the end of the day, I think it's Daniel Pink. He wrote this book called The Power of Regret. And there's 4 main regrets. And one of them is a foundational regret. And a lot of people all over the world have wrote in to answer this question, what's one of your biggest regrets, And there's a lot of responses in there that I wish I would have started saving sooner, right? And that is a discipline problem. We have to be intentional about setting aside money. You have to be a good saver in order to be successful. There's just no other way around it. And honestly, it's good to build that habit, but it's also so satisfying when you see, hey, like this amount is going up every single month. Okay, Tisha said, can you list 2 to 3 lost income opportunities when it comes to personal spending or banking? I'm not quite sure what that question means. list 2 to 3 lost income opportunities when it comes to personal spending or banking. Tisha, could you clarify that question just a little bit? I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly and also answering it in a way that, okay, Alexandria said, what's an easy way you recommend to start saving money? So like I said, whatever you're getting paid, immediately when that hits your account, put 10 to 20% of that in a different savings account. So like literally before you do anything, you need to put 10 to 20% in savings, right? So if you are, if you're the type of person where you need to kind of put stricter rules on yourself, and it's easy for you to transfer money from your checking to savings, I would actually recommend open up a savings account in a different bank, right? Where you don't have a card to it, or you hide the card away and you just transfer that money to a different bank if you want to make sure that you're honoring what you set out to do. Okay, Tisha said, if I spend $300 on my shopping addiction each week, what could I better put that money to use for instead? That's a good question. So we didn't really talk about this that much, but one of the things that I teach people about and I'm super passionate about is infinite banking. So I would say to put that in an infinite banking policy. But if you're also a person that really is passionate about real estate or passionate about creating cash flow, there's so many other ways you can put that money to use so that you can have it work for you. And then that cash flow can pay for your shopping addiction if you wanted to. Oh, that's a good question.
So, Teresa, maybe go back and talk about the power of having a standalone account that helps with the discipline of moving cash from your cash account so that you do pay yourself first or save first.
Yeah. So like I said, I would recommend, if you don't already have a savings account set that up, rule number 1. And then every single time you get paid, just put that money there first. So I'm talking about before you even pay your rent or your mortgage, you have to tell the universe that you are the most important and that you are the best asset. And one of the best ways to do that is by paying yourself first. And I can't remember which podcast I heard this on, but someone was talking about, an income earner who was making over $1 million a year, but he only had $50,000 to show for that amount of income that he earned. And so how he put it was, he worked really hard for that $50,000. And it's so true. How much you keep of your money is so important. We have to be diligent. It doesn't matter how much money you make if you don't know how to keep it, right? And the basics of that is savings. Angie Perkins says, this is very informative session and we'll be reviewing it. So good information. Oh, great. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. I was actually so nervous that you guys would be bored today because money is one of those things that it could be so boring. So I'm glad that you found it informative, and I hope that, you implement some of those tips that we talked about.
So Teresa, why don't you tell your hot water tank emergency story? Because I think that really brings all of the elements together that you've talked about, and how much stress that took off you and all the people that share your household. So.
Yes. Okay. Good question. And then someone asked for my information. So I'll give you guys my email. Please feel free to, get connected, say hi, let's get on a video chat. I love meeting new people and helping with what I can. But yes, so this was a great example of an emergency. So I bought my house, I would say like 2 years ago now, and it's a newer build. And so, when you're buying a new home, you think, great, I won't have to pay for repairs for like forever. This is amazing. And I can't remember what happened. So the hot water wasn't going on for as long as it normally would. So I just have shortened my shower time. Instead of 20 minutes, is 10. Anyways, it didn't occur to me to think that, you should probably get that water heater checked out. So I came home on Friday, a few weeks ago now, and like I said, my brother lives with me, and my brother never calls me. So he's calling me. I'm in a client meeting, so I ignore his call like twice. And I'm like, oh my God, this is probably like a super bad emergency. And then I finally look at my phone again after I finish, and he sends me all these pictures of my garage being flooded because my water heater, all 800 pounds of that water is gone, right? So that means it went somewhere it probably wasn't supposed to. And so I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I've been a homeowner. I don't know what to do. Luckily, my boyfriend and my dad are better at stuff like that. So I called them. But ultimately, everyone was pointing fingers at each other like, okay, it's the manufacturer's problem, so they should pay for it, but they're not going to pay for the cost of labor. So ended up being like 2,200 bucks out of pocket. And because I had that money saved in my infinite banking policy, or just saved in general, I have access to those funds, and I was able to kind of take care of that, even though it wasn't something that I was super excited to pay for. So it's just like, you never know when things are going to happen. And like I said, real life happens all the time. So we just never really know. I think did Tim have a question? I know I saw you raised your hand, but
I had a question, but I was testing the hand raise button at the same time.
okay.
So I have a question for you. One of the things that happened in my life is I came out of high school and I didn't really have a plan for myself. So could you talk about the importance of teaching this to high schoolers, and what are some steps that we could do to share this story with high schoolers?
Yeah, and actually that's a really good question, because when I first started out teaching people about finances, I actually reached out to a few high schools and offered my services for free, and they said no. So I'm actually not quite sure like what legally is able to happen in school systems with how much you're able to give them that information. And to be quite honest, I think that it's intentional that we're not taught these things, because if you think about it, without financial education, we're going to be working for someone for the rest of our lives, right? We're not going to be in a position to figure out how to make money work for us. So I would say if you have good contacts in high schools currently, and you're able to set that up, I think it's really important. Teach them the basics of savings, teach them how credit works, teach them how taxes work, right? I remember when I was first working at Starbucks and I saw, I was like, wait, where is all this money going? A big portion of that is going to the government. And that's not something that, you learn about much in school. So yeah, I would say if you can get in the door, first off, excellent. And if you have the opportunity to kind of teach some young minds, I would say those are really good things to focus on, the importance of saving. And one of the things that Deepak Chopra, I believe, says, which I think is a really important question to ask kids, is, there's so many different ways to make money, but it's really like, who do you want to be? How do you want to help other people? Because if you can make a career out of whatever brings you joy, I really think that's where you'll make not only a lot of money, but you'll have so much fun helping a lot of people. So that's a good question.
So do we have any more questions for Tarisa? If not, I'm going to thank her and pass the ball back to Anthony. All right, so Tarisa has her information up on the screen, and if you're local in the East Valley of Arizona, Phoenix area, I would highly recommend you get and talk with Tarisa. She's very educational. We've had a few educational coffees, and amazing young lady. So thanks for sharing your wisdom and knowledge, Tarisa. It's always a joy seeing you, and I'm lucky I get to see you again next Tuesday.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys all today, and thanks for letting me share. So,
all right, excellent job, Anthony.
That was absolutely phenomenal, and I can tell you that our audience we've been monitoring the chats and LinkedIn Live and everywhere else, and it's been absolutely phenomenal. Well, I'll tell you one thing, to all those that are on the live streaming channels, we're going to take about an hour break, go take lunch, stretch, whatever you need to do. We'll be back with our last session of the KT Virtual Summit. So we'll see y'all shortly. And